let's dial in a little bit because you talked a little bit about Ahsoka, Andor, Kenobi, and whatnot. And I listened to your latest because you do a podcast, and it's
Yep.
what is JJ's one
It's called JJ's One Man Podcast. It's me
man
basically
podcast. Okay.
monologuing, talking about certain topics I feel like I want to speak on. So I
Yeah.
try to do it weekly, when I can, but sometimes either there's not enough to talk about, or again, I'm so busy doing other content at the same time because again, I do it all alone.
Yeah. So your latest one was about Ahsoka, and I want to dial in on Ahsoka a little bit. And I try to make my content evergreen, because I don't want to have to do this the same topic weekly.
Yeah.
If it's evergreen, okay. It's been a few months maybe since I talked about this topic, but it's still relevant. So here's the thing about Ahsoka. The contention around it, you mentioned it's sort of because people are jaded by Lucasfilm. Even though Dave Filoni is doing an outstanding job, people are still jaded because of past projects.
Exactly.
Like we were talking about Andor and whatnot. So real quick before we jump into the latest, episode of Ahsoka, the past projects, Disney Plus projects, there's some issues with it.
Yeah.
Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were actually amazing. There's, you could have a lot of different takes on why they succeeded or why they didn't, but they were a success in some capacity.
Yeah.
Then we get Book of Boba Fett. The zeitgeist wasn't there for that. Okay, it's, Boba Fett's a very popular character within Star Wars. However, the series kind of fell flat. Then you go on to Andor and Kenobi. So I'm not sure your views on these series, but out of all of these, I actually like Andor the most. However, I don't think it fits into Star Wars as well. So can you just what's your take on why people are jaded in the first place? Is it because these series are falling flat? Disney's just not doing a good job, or Lucasfilm, I should say. They're not handling these characters, these properties correctly, or is it because Dave Filoni isn't now? You know what I mean? Was it better back then? Was Mandalorian season 1 and 2 the pinnacle, or are we headed in the right direction, or are we headed the wrong direction? Andor, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Like there's a number of things with that we should definitely tackle. Number one, back then, okay, because keep in mind, Mandalorian came about after the fallout of the sequel trilogy, so people were already feeling a type of way. This was
contrast,
after the Rise of Skywalker, I believe. Yeah, it was like sometime after the Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
And the first real project we got wasn't even a movie; it was the series, which was Mando season 1, like that. Now, a lot of people don't seem to realize, or they seem to forget often, is that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni had a big hand in The Mandalorian season 1 and season 2. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why certain things happened in those seasons of why they turned out the way they did is because of especially Dave Filoni being there, but also Jon Favreau. Now, when you start getting into the other series, okay, you start to see a lot of things change, and the reception of them change heavily is because there was a lot of other meddling behind the scenes that has been documented, has been talked about. There's a lot of conflict that we still don't have the full story about, especially between Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy. There's a lot of things going on, especially with season 3 of Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was a mess, and then leading into what we got now with Ahsoka and even Andor. My main thing with Andor is like I said before, I alluded to it, Andor is not like poorly constructed. The problem is that it's constructed in a way that it's trying not to be a Star Wars show, or at least trying not to fit within the Star Wars galaxy or the universe. And for me as a fan, that's a problem. I understand that a lot of people all over the place have been praising that show for being the best Disney Star Wars thing since Rogue One, which I heavily disagree with. I don't think that's a fair assessment at all. I get why people like it, but also I totally understand because I was watching this with watch parties. I was in Star Wars Theory's watch party for a lot of those episodes, and I saw other watch parties, the reactions, just to kind of gauge where everybody was at. And the problem that I had with all this is that Star Wars fans that have been in this universe for a long time already, that have actually seen a lot of what this universe is or what it could be, recognized that this was trying to be Star Wars in name only without trying to be part or be as Star Wars, which is a shame because, you know, I was hyped up for Andor. I was ready to watch this. I was like, yo, this is going to be an awesome spy thriller. It's going to be Andor. It's going to get dark. He's going to do some crazy stuff because the rebellion's desperate and all stuff. And I did not get that. I felt it was a bore fest. I felt that despite the clever writing and the clever dialogue and the monologue by Skarsgård that he delivers in there, it's awesome. But all of that is overshadowed for me because this thing just does not feel like a Star Wars project. Rogue One, which really is what Andor was trying to be, you know, felt like a Star Wars project. Granted, you had other elements that were more traditional Star Wars that were in there, but the problem was, what really goes back to the heart of is that Lucasfilm is so like disjointed with what exactly they want to do and what direction they want to go, that it's affected everything they've been involved with, even the good things. With Andor, they gave it to a guy that forgot he was making a Star Wars project. Like, why would you say that? Why would you go out publicly and say that? Here's the other thing, too. With Obi-Wan Kenobi, there was a lot of stuff that people had, you know, with the writer's room and some of the stuff that made it to the screen and stuff that would not be acceptable in any other Star Wars project. You mean to tell me that you could slap Stormtrooper helmets with your hand, with your bare hand? Like, come on. Like, there's just certain things that's like, okay, we need to sit down and have a conversation with this. Like, that should have never gone past the scripting phase. It would have never been a big deal if the character, I forgot her name at the moment, but if she would have shot the Stormtroopers with a blaster, not smack them with an open hand. It's like, there's just certain things that when Star Wars fans react to that negatively and stuff, it created that whole discourse and stuff. And this is what I think is the biggest problem, too. Because while there are good stuff in all these different shows, there's good elements, there's good moments, even in the ones that I dislike. The problem with this, though, is that sometimes Lucasfilm does themselves no favors when they get part of the discourse or they allow the discourse to fan it in a way that it ends up being. A lot of the time, especially post-sequel trilogy, was the discourse that was going on about those films that was bleeding out into everything else, and Lucasfilm was feeding into it. You know, why would you have Rian Johnson come out in a picture with a mug that says Luke fanboy tears? Like, who does that? George would never do something like that, would never allow something like that to happen. I don't think Disney was okay with that, but no, it happens. Somebody had to be okay with that. I'm pretty sure we all know who it is. But the other thing about that, too, is that, look, I don't think it's a fair thing for people that work at Lucasfilm, a lot of people that worked on these projects, like the actors and stuff, to be so contentious with the fans. Like, look, we get it. You know, not everybody's going to agree. There's been a lot of bad actors out there. Not actors like actors, but bad people that are disingenuous with social media, with their opinions, with their criticism and stuff. That type of stuff is not fair. A lot of stuff that Moses Ingram got with her involvement with Obi-Wan Kenobi was not fair. And a lot of that, I think the result of it was not her fault. So she should have never been treated the way she was. But there's still these issues that are lingering around that need to be addressed that I feel like Lucasfilm often does not do so. Whenever you get a good project, like from Dave Filoni and stuff with Ahsoka, or even in Rebels, or even in the Tales of the Jedi series, Tales of the Jedi premiered on the same night, same day, by the way, as a new episode of Andor, which was the worst idea they could have did, because guess what? Everybody loved Tales of the Jedi. Then we went to go watch Andor. Like,
Tales of the Jedi is, in my opinion, because you brought up, people are saying Andor is the greatest project since Rogue One. To me, I think it's Tales of the Jedi. You could say Visions. I think both are.
Yeah, but the only reason why I don't count Visions and stuff like that within that same convo is because remember, Visions is not canon. Like, really, Visions is an awesome. Love that project. Visions
it's amazing.
I would love for them to do a Star Wars Infinities in that same vein to get to like the legend stories we want to see. Like that type of stuff would be cool. But when we're talking canon, like stuff that Disney now considers canon, because they're the ones that kind of messed up everything with the expanded universe. But if we're talking about just their canon and stuff, I don't think Andor is the best thing. I think Andor is fine in its own little silo, which is what a lot of people don't want to admit and they don't want to agree upon. But it's honestly the truth, because Rogue One does everything that Andor tries to be much better and still respects the legacy of Star Wars, because it leads directly into A New Hope in many different ways. Like, it's just that, again, it gets back to the discourse where not only the delivery of a lot of opinions is really poor, but also the company, like I said, doesn't do themselves any favors by allowing that to linger rather than actually trying to be a little bit much more, mature and have a little bit more class with it. You never see Dave Filoni go on social media talking smack about the fans or talking smack about anything. You never see that from George Lucas. You never saw that with Jon Favreau like that. You never even saw that, I would even argue, with Hayden Christensen or Rosario Dawson, or any of the people that actually people love that's related to all this stuff. And I think that speaks volumes to not only what came from the sequels, but comes from a lot of the stuff that people are just not really feeling.
Yeah.
Even the Book of Boba Fett, look at what happened with a lot of the actors there. Like, it really speaks volumes to stuff.
That was everything with Tamora Morrison, very unfortunate. Super. I mean, that's extremely unfortunate.
He deserves better because he's
way better.
He's one of those dudes from the prequels. Like, he deserves far better than what he got.
And so first of all, thank you for your expert analysis on that. You have been there on the ground floor pretty much with all of this, as your job. And I think that was great analysis of that. I want to tackle a few things though.
Sure.
I think it does come down to the lack of respect, not just for the characters, but for the real people involved in this. Because when you see the actors, their job is to act. There's somebody directing them. Mm-hmm. There's somebody that wrote their lines for them most of the time. You know what I mean? So, like with Moses Ingram, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Like we said with Tamora Morrison, that's just an unfortunate situation. But it goes back to, I think there's a deeper problem than what we see on screen. There's, like you were saying, it falls back on, we know who it falls back on.
It's a systemic problem.
It's this,
really.
Exactly, systemic. The real meaning of the word systemic problem. It is literally a systemic problem that they have. But there are some good projects coming out from them. And I think what is so interesting is that in contrast with Star Wars, I'm not sure how big of a Star Trek fan you are.
Oh, I'm big. I'm a TNG guy. I'm a big I'm a giant Star Wars fan, but I respect a lot of Star Trek because, again, I grew up with TNG.
I feel the same way. I grew up with Enterprise, and I love Enterprise. I think it's amazing. I love TNG as well, but I grew up with Enterprise and the movies, of course. So in contrast, though, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, it is absolutely amazing, and they respect the characters. You can watch the Ready Room where they actually talk about everything behind the scenes, and it's like when you see Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni or even Bryce Dallas Howard in the specials on Disney Plus. They really enjoy what they do, and they want to respect and be in that world. They don't want to just take it and
make it their own.
Make their own thing. Make their own thing just with Star Wars as the name of it. Like a lot, you see that a lot with Rian Johnson, the discourse around that, saying that, it's a great Rian Johnson film.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't. It should be a great Star Wars film, first and foremost. Like that, there was a lot with that one, and again, it gets into a lot of the sequel trilogy talk. That's the movie really that, as much as people like to overlook it, that's the one that really broke a lot of things for many people. But it really comes back to a lot of stuff that was there was a lot of poor decisions made. I'm talking about on the administration level, not just with the movie itself, but like administration level, where a lot of things were allowed to go on and allowed to happen that turned out the way that it did, which is a shame because I don't think that a lot of the actors deserved a lot of stuff. The one who has the most legit beef out of everyone in all of new Star Wars under Disney is John Boyega. I think he deserves a lot more than what he got, and he deserves a lot more better treatment than what he received.
And he still respects the fans and the IP throughout all of that, which is
he's a bigger man than
amazing.
A lot of other people give him credit for, big time, for what happened.
And I would, and for that reason alone, I would love to see him come back under a different leadership. Not just for redemption, but just because he loves the IP, he loves the fans. You know
what the sad part about that is, though? Like, I don't think, as much as I like John Boyega, I'm cool with Oscar Isaac. I'm even cool with Adam Driver, and even Daisy Ridley to an extent. The problem is that portion or that era of Star Wars has been so damaging for a lot of people and so distasteful for a lot of people. You can't do it without that coming back up. This is why Rian Johnson was never going to get another trilogy. Like, everybody kept talking about that. He kept talking about that for a long time. But business-wise, even if you take away the fandom from it, there is no reason to go back to that. There is absolutely zero benefit to doing that. Not just for him, but for the entire brand. Because without the brand recognition, without the brand power, you don't have any of these projects whatsoever. And I think those three movies, and specifically his movie, did such a disservice to everything. That just really put everything off course big time.
Now, we're talking about the fan reception and all of that, but really numbers drive everything. So you're right. There would be no incentive for that to
the whole conversation to be about that movie would be about everything else, even though there would be some people that go see it, but it would not be the same as like what was with The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens was such a big deal in a lot of different ways.
It was, and it numbers drive everything. So it's hard because I get it. You want to take risks. You can't just put out the same thing every time. I get it. Now, like I said, in contrast with Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, they take risks all of the time. I don't want to spoil much of that show. Everyone should go watch it. If you're a fan of Star Wars, just watch Strange New Worlds. But they take risks and it pays off. And they respect
continuity.
They respect continuity, even though the continuity in Star Trek has been messed up many times because of time travel and different reasons. But they still respect the continuity of it. And it pays off, and it has been paying off numbers-wise for them too. And I was watching it, and I said, I would love Star Wars to take some of these risks. And it's funny because the biggest risk I think they've ever taken in Star Wars was this week during episode 4 of Ahsoka.
And did it well. That's the key part.
It paid off, yes. And I think they did it well because there was somebody behind the scenes, Dave Filoni. And it's I guarantee you 90% of the people watching don't know who Dave Filoni is. They'll see a guy in a cowboy hat and just think it's another guy in a cowboy hat. They don't know that's...
He's legit right now the reason for a long time why Disney Star Wars stuff or projects of those has been relevant. Like, he's as close as you get to George Lucas without George Lucas right now at this point.
And what's nice is he is not copying George Lucas. He's actually taking what George Lucas did and continuing it, not repeating it. You know what I mean? And I was watching episode 4, and you said this on the last podcast. It feels like a Seven Samurai movie.
Yeah,
which is how Star Wars.
What is it? Not a. Oh my god. Oh my god. I forgot. I can't believe I forgot the director's Kurosawa. It feels like a Kurosawa movie.
It does, and that's what George was inspired by. Partially that, and of course, Flash Thompson or
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon. And sorry, I'm a big Spider-Man fan too, but Flash Gordon with the serial matinee style, but also kind of mixed with the Kurosawa filmmaking of it. Beautiful combo that somehow worked.
Yeah.
And Dave is continuing that now with his own type of lore that he introduced in Rebels, which is a world between worlds.
Mm-hmm.
This has fans confused that haven't paid attention to the cartoons and animated series like Rebels and
that should tell you something about a lot of those opinions. A lot of those people that weren't fans enough to go watch that stuff are confused. It's been like, well, it's like missing out a movie in the middle of a trilogy. Like you don't know what happened here, but you didn't do your homework. I'm sorry.
I can't believe Anakin's Force Ghost showed up.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. And for the record, that's bigger than his appearance in Obi-Wan Kenobi. And technically, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the more relevant show for him to be in. But with this one, obviously being Ahsoka, him being her master, his Padawan and stuff. It's a bigger deal for Rebels fans that have followed Ahsoka, because we know like big things are happening, and it was done tastefully in a way that was handled with such care, because it wasn't just that made the episode good. This was a banger episode for like so many reasons, and that was just like the mic drop moment for like Dave to just like walk off stage afterwards.
So I want to talk about some of the banger moments. So I was kind of joking with the Force Ghost thing, because it's Star Wars got into the MCU trope of, oh, it's the end of the episode, let's kind of tease something.
Yeah.
Or it's the end of the series, let's tease something. Oh, you miss Qui-Gon? Here's his Force Ghost for no apparent reason.
Which, by the way, it doesn't work with canon, but we'll let it slide because we get to see Liam Neeson.
He wasn't able to be a Force Ghost.
Exactly.
But so we understand that. Dave obviously understands that, and we can see it because it's not technically a Force Ghost of Anakin. It essentially is Anakin himself, just outside of our world, the Star Wars world.
He's bending it within reason.
Within reason, and it's paying off. So it was a banger episode.
Yeah.
I think let's talk about Merrick, because your Merrick theory sucks. I don't know where that came from, but you know the meme.
That came from what is it? It's based off the Snoke theory sucks thing from
Yes,
Last Jedi stuff. But the reason why that came from that is because a lot of people thought that Merrick was actually going to be Galen Merrick, which is Star Killer from the Force Unleashed games. But that turned out not to be the case.
I'm so glad that wasn't the case. The only theory I liked was it could have been Cal Kestis, but I'm just a huge Cal Kestis fan.
I want Cal to go out like that.
I know. It would have ruined it. But anyways, I'm glad they did it like that because that's another risk. When has Star Wars ever done anything like that?
Well, keep in mind, they've done a lot of
risk
with The Mandalorian, technically. Like that, if you really look at it, as far as original characters, like characters that don't technically connect to other stuff, that's Din Djarin, and that's a lot of other stuff that comes from that series.
So, the was okay. I don't know if this is confirmed. Was that Night Sister magic?
Yeah. From my understanding, okay, because the series itself doesn't do a good job of like explaining it, other than when you see the actual Night Sister in there that's working with Ray Stevenson's character and Shin Hati, right? That she does magic, but from my understanding, that guy Merrick was actually put together by Night Sister magic, but it just hasn't been detailed fully. And again, that could change. That could not be the case because there's other Inquisitors that we've seen that happen to, I believe, in Rebels at one point or the Clone Wars in a similar fashion, but not exactly like what happened to Merrick here. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
And that's what I'm saying. I hope that's the case because that is a risk for Star Wars fans or for casual fans. This looks like a person, and then you take your lightsaber through him and he just disappears.
I'm not gonna lie, though. It would have been sweet if it was Star Killer, though. I'm not gonna lie, because there's you gotta understand, like, the reason why that theory was so like passed around is because there was a lot of like evidence that pointed to it. Because imagine having Vader's apprentice versus Anakin's apprentice. There was so much like metaphor and like so much like stuff set up for something like that. On top of him being an Inquisitor, freaking Sam Witwer talked about that he had a conversation with Dave Filoni about Starkiller being an Inquisitor. Like there was just so many things that were matching up to that.
His name was in the credits.
His name was in the credits too. It's like you can't blame a lot of Star Wars fans for being like, "Yo, something's up."
And maybe he was the body double because it kind of looked like
he did the voice. I'm pretty sure he did Merrick's voice. I would not be surprised because it has him listed as additional voices, but we just don't know exactly what voice he did.
Okay. I like it. I like the risks that they're taking nonetheless. And I like specifically that they don't explain it. And you said they don't do a good job of explaining it, and you're right. And I like that because it doesn't affect the pacing. They don't take time out of the action, specifically with this episode. Yes, it's a series. You got to slow down to, be able to fill in your episodes. Explain it
right there, like in that moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They might explain it at some point, which is fine, but they didn't stop the episode. And this episode, the fighting, fantastic.
Awesome.
We see different styles. We see different. I love the different lightsabers because we've never seen orange in live action before.
Mm-hmm. This is a first.
Well, an orange hue. Yeah, this is a first. And I love that they're not Sith. They could go either way. I think it's going to be fun to see where it goes.
Like the thing is like Ray Stevens Balin, who Ray Steven R.I.P. who's playing him now. He's awesome.
Fantastic.
All his episodes, all his scenes, been awesome so far. But what I like about him and the reason why I call him a Dark Jedi is because he still has some sort of element of a code where he actually has reason. He has like rationality behind what he's doing, even though what he's doing technically is not good. He still has some sort of like motivation that doesn't make him like a Sith. Because a Sith, if they were a true Sith, like if that was Darth Maul would be going to eradicate Ahsoka and really trying to bring down the Republic. Clearly, Balin and Shin have totally different stuff. They've just been really, really like put off by the Jedi Order. Clearly, it seems like they just haven't, detailed it yet, which might sound like it's going to be super interesting when they do.
Well, we know the Jedi Order was flawed. It wasn't. Yeah. Here's my issue. I think a lot of Star Wars fans don't understand this. If I can say that, the Jedi were flawed. They were meant to be flawed. The Jedi Order was not good. It wasn't good.
It was a far extreme of good, is what it was.
It was a far extreme. They did many good things, but it was not the standard for the Force or good. They were very much flawed, very much dogmatic, which there was truth to what Palpatine said. And if you look at the Jedi Order as they were the right ones, I think you're going to have a lot of issues with a lot of things in Star Wars, because their dogmatic views kind of led to a lot of people turning, and like you see with Balin, like you saw with Anakin. This was a result of the dogmatic views, which is another reason I love Tales of the Jedi. We see this with Dooku in there.
Yep.
And that's one of my favorite things, is when they really do almost character studies, which I hope they dive into Balin, RIP, because he's an amazing character. I hope they
You know what's funny about
show
that?
somewhat of the backstory. Yeah.
You know what's funny about that? Because I think that it is fair to look at the Jedi from their perspective as them being right. I think that when you look at everything like that, I think they are the right path or the right view in the context of Star Wars as a universe. But what I think what really makes them so flawed, and what makes it fascinating for them to be flawed, is that, again, it's such a far extreme where they're trying to be paragons for what they stand for. This is why Qui-Gon technically should have been on the council. He was the Jedi. He was supposed to be the father figure of Anakin. He would not, if he had lived and all this stuff had played out, none of this other stuff would have happened. And I think that the Jedi would have never, the Order specifically, would have never fell. I think that Palpatine, and his perspective, and a lot of people that follow him for a while, within the original saga, he points out a lot of the things that are technically the obvious that the Jedi just don't see, because they're so
there's a truth to it.
Yeah, there's a truth to it, but they're so obsessed with being on this side without letting the other extreme come into play, which eventually is what happens when the Order falls and stuff. I think that it's still a good, fascinating way to look at it.
I love analyzing Star Wars, and you see the dogmatic views, and you see when Yoda says we can't, or I think it was Yoda, we can't train him. That's
Mace Windu. That's Mace Windu that said
Mace Windu.
Yeah. He's too old.
He's one of the most dogmatic. Yeah, he's too old. But then we see Qui-Gon saying, well, it would be the right thing to do it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that in the council's views, they couldn't have Qui-Gon, because he went against what they wanted. But in reality, Qui-Gon was following the Force. It was the self-righteousness too of the Jedi, and thinking that they were right.
That they were right all the time. I think that's the biggest thing.
And it led to obviously Anakin turning, and now Balin Reva. We see that a little bit with her character. I thought it was kind of interesting what they did with her character, but alas, the writing. But